Okay, so let's, like, open all of the new things. So, we start with Stellar Superconduct. Elemental reaction, Stellar Superconduct. There's no R here. When cryo comes into contact with electroelement under specific conditions, the special reaction Stellar Superconduct will be triggered, temporarily converting the surrounding area into the wondrous stellar glow domain. That's Hop Stellars. Oh, right, yeah, no. Anyways, when enemies within the stellar glow domain are struck by cryo or electro attacks, the domain shall seal the diffused elemental energy. What does that mean? Good question. Every 3 seconds, all sealed elemental power is unleashed and converted into buffs for all party members inside the domain, granting cryo and electro damage bonus, and raising the base reaction multiplier of their stellar superconduct damage, lasting for 3 seconds. Now, we don't know exactly how this works. Additionally, enemies inside the domain will have their physical res reduced. So, what the fuck does any of this mean? That is a good question. That is a very good question. I'm not sure, right? One possibility is that the increase to, like, the percent, like, the numbers on the damage bonus and the numbers on the increase base reaction multiplier get increased by the amount of times you hit with cryo or electro. That's kind of what this reads as to me. But we did have a leak a while back that it was just a fixed number. And I don't know if that leak was fake or if it's just that this is a weird description that doesn't actually convey properly. Maybe it's some kind of gauge that can be trivially filled, maybe. Can I run Yulo with Sandrone? I mean, you're not allowed, but... I mean, I haven't even fucking read her kit yet, okay? So, like, we'll get there. Anyway, certain characters gain the blessing Radiant Stellar Superconduct within the domain, powering their effects. So basically this is saying Stellar Superconduct also directly buffs some characters. This is a whole lot of nothing, honestly. This really doesn't tell us much, unfortunately. So we kind of just have to take a look at what the buffs are. Alright, let's take a look at Cyno. So, while in the burst state, Cyno will periodically get an eye. And if he uses his skill during the eye, it deals extra damage, blah, blah, blah. Okay, new effect. When the skill is used during the eye, you fire stellar damage instead of electro damage. But it's electro-stellar damage, not cryo-stellar damage. So Stellar Superconduct can be either cryo or electro damage. It's not always the same, right? So you guys know how Columbina, when she triggers lunar charge damage, it's electro? Different here. Doesn't work the same way. Alright, Cyno is electro, and Risley is cryo. Smaller multiplier than the original. I mean, yeah, but it's gonna work differently, you know? Like, it is a smaller multiplier, but it's also gonna scale with EM, and it might ignore defense and have a separate multiplier for fun as well. But, like, it is reaction damage, which means your elemental mastery will multiply this damage somehow. Alright, Ascension passives. This part isn't new, so normal attacks deal damage based on 150% of Cyno's EM. The bolts is 250 instead, and the Stellar Superconduct bolts are 600 instead. Keep in mind, these bolts don't scale with damage percent and don't scale with EM multiplier. That's why the numbers on it are so many times bigger than the attack scaling. So you don't double dip into these things. Why not EM multiplier? Because it's a flat damage buff. At least that's what I'm expecting. Kind of like how when you look at the EM multipliers on Nefer's abilities, you get the double dip in EM, both on the direct EM scaling and on the Lunar Bloom multiplier. But when you look at the EM scaling on Llama's Burst, right? The number on that is way fucking bigger because it doesn't get multiplied by Nefer's EM multiplier. It doesn't get multiplied by any EM multiplier, right? Because it's an additive source of damage. So attack sans EM Gala, we don't have the formula yet, so I don't know. We'll see. That's possible. Could be double attack, could be double EM, could be one of each. Could be, likely will be dependent on weapon, right? This is a 4 ignore, aggravate EM multiplier. Aggravate is also additive damage. Like, it was always basically a separate number that was just added onto the same number. I wouldn't... But I wouldn't be surprised if it just doesn't apply Electro now, so it can't trigger Aggravate. Anyways, additional passive. When not in the burst, after using skill, briefly enter the burst. Huge! Fun allowed! Yeah, so... I think... Yeah, so you're not gonna get eyes from this, right? But yeah, so you don't get eyes, but part of Cyno's kit resets the skill cooldown. It doesn't reset it. It's that using burst changes the skill cooldown from 7 to 3. I think it's 3. Maybe 3.5 or 4, whatever. Your cooldown is back to 0. TF equal perma ult, but it's not perma ult. Like, that's the thing, right? You can get basically permanent electro infusion by just using your skill now, but you don't get the eyes. You don't get the Enseer stance, so you don't get the chasmic soul flarer. Sorry, you don't get the judication, like the extra 3 bolts, and that's his stellar superconduct damage. That's the only part of his kit, I think, that they are giving stellar damage to. Why not? Because the condition for the burst appearing is not, or for the eyes appearing, is not having the electro infusion, it's having used the burst. So you get the infusion, but you don't get the eyes. This is basically mostly just an overworld thing. This is not something that will matter in rotations. I guess it'll matter first rotation in Abyss. Makes him a lot less reliant on getting his burst for the first rotation, I guess. But that's kind of it. Sounds like the E puts him in burst state. Almost, right? It puts him in the burst state, but the eyes specifically state, while in the Paxorn Path Clearer state, which is the burst state, of Sacred Rite Wolf Swiftness, which is the name of his elemental burst. While in the Paxorn Path Clearer state, which is the burst state, of Sacred Rite Wolf Swiftness, which is the name of his elemental burst. So he only enters the eyes when he's in the electro infusion state provided by using his elemental burst. It's just that now you're making some assumptions there. I'm assuming that the fucking words that are written mean what they are supposed to. Like, yeah, sure, I'm assuming there's not a massive mistranslation, which is potentially a bad assumption to make, I guess. But, like, if we aren't gonna be assuming that words mean what they're supposed to, what the fuck is the point of reading any of this? Like, it literally says that the condition for the eyes is being in the burst provided, like, being in the state provided by the burst of Sacred Rite Wolf Swiftness. That's the name of his elemental burst, not of his Ascension passive. Anyways, like, it is possible that they just, you know, didn't change an old wording that isn't accurate to the new kit because they got lazy and forgot about it, and that's why. And actually, it doesn't work the way that it says it does. But, like, again, right? Until proven otherwise, we're not gonna just assume that it does the exact opposite of what it says it does. You know? Like, there's not much of a reason to do that. Elemental skill. So, this is just specifying that using skill only extends burst duration if you use the burst. Which, you know, makes a whole lot of sense, I think. That test confirms he gets the eyes? No. You don't understand Mortuary Rite requires the eye? No, it doesn't. Mortuary Rite is the name of his 3-second cooldown skill that he can use when he has the Electro Infusion. The name of the extra ability he gets when he uses Mortuary Rite during his burst is Judication, not Mortuary Rite. Right? Mortuary Rite is just the name of his skill when he has the Electro Infusion. He can use this when the eye isn't there. That's just the name of his skill, basically. So basically, quality of life, exploration / Stygian first rotation change, that he can get a bad burst by using his skill without burst, and Stellar Conduct slapped onto his eye. We can check the cons. After using the burst, he gets attack speed. That's just what it already did, right? And yeah, okay. And then the Stellar, upon entering Pathworn Pact Clearer state, this doesn't say from using the burst, so you should get this from using the skill as well. He gets 200 EM. Wait a second. While active, if Cyno swaps out while on the field, the next active character inherits the Rising Sun together effect and its remaining duration. Ho! Now that's something. Now that's cool, actually. Quick swap Cyno. You still don't want a quick swap. Cyno's just not a unit that lends itself to quick swap very well, because he basically has infinite uptime, and like he doesn't keep his ult after swap. That's not what this says, chat. If he swaps out and then swaps back in, he can get the Electro Infusion back, but he won't get the eyes back. The eyes are gone forever, right? And it seems like what they're doing is they're making the eyes a lot more impactful by slapping Stellar Superconduct stuff into the eyes. So you don't want to play Stellar Cyno as a quick swap unit. The main thing that this does is this gives 200 EM to your Chi-Chi nuke burst and other such things. That's the idea here. C1 and C2 work for dual carry team. C1 doesn't work for dual carry team though. Like, that's the thing. The way that Cyno's damage is gonna work with this change, assuming that the Stellar Conduct damage is actually big enough to represent a large portion of his damage. Let me open Paint. We're gonna graph his damage over time, okay? Not DPS over time, just damage over time. So he swaps in, and he does like, he tickles the enemies for a while, and then the eye appears, bam. And then he keeps tickling the enemies, and then the eye appears, bam. And same, bam, bam. Does he get 4 eyes? He does, right? Okay, whatever. Bam, okay. So like Flynn's kind of, in a way. But one thing you might notice is that the gap between these two is actually bigger than the gap between the beginning of his field time and his first instance of real damage is longer than between the first and the second. And then it stays consistent. So if you swap out of Cyno after like 10 seconds, you get 2 instances of real damage in 10 seconds. If you swap out of Cyno after like 18 seconds, you get 4 in 18 seconds. So you get basically more per second. We'll look at C2 in a second, okay? But C1 does not work for quick swap stuff. All right, that's not true. I'm actually being like very generous with this. Like, the reality is actually that the first one is like omega late. Like, let me pull up to Abyss here. All right, and I want you to pay attention to the timer. Okay, I will pretend like I am swapping into Cyno at 55 on the timer, and I want you to see when we get our first eye. Alright, so first eye happens at 49, 48, whatever. And then next one at 45, 44, right? So it's like 7 seconds for the first one, and then it's 4 seconds for each additional one. So unless your buffs expire, his kit just really doesn't lend itself very well to a quick swap playstyle. If the buffs expire, you might be forced into that, but you're not happy about it. Anyway, C2. When Cyno's normal attacks hit enemies, electro damage bonus is increased by 10%. So 50 damage percent, that's just what he already had. Additionally, when characters affected by his 200 EM buff, which is applying to himself and to whoever swapped into after Cyno's used stuff, the Stellar Superconduct reaction damage is increased by 10%, and you get up to 5 stacks of it, so 50%. But yeah, like, these things they're not really quick swap things. They're things that are gonna make it so that you're off your like supports that have nuke abilities, like Chi-Chi with her new burst, are gonna get buffs from Cyno. And if you're really strapped for options, you'll be able to use Cyno as just a straight up support for your stellar characters. A small artifact change plus 40% Stellar Conduct, yeah. That, to me, hints at the Stellar Conduct rate or EM multiplier being the same as the Lunar one. Because Lunar Charge to Electro Charge is generally 1 to 2, right? Like, TF is 20% Lunar Charge, 40% Electro Charge. So if it's also 1 to 2 for Stellar to Superconduct, then it's probably just the same formula. Yeah, like, we don't know if there's going to be a base damage multiplier or anything like that yet, but... I mean, the Sandrone passive isn't what I'm referring to. Like, I'm referring to, like, the ×3 that Lunar Charge has and the ×1.6 that Lunar Crystallize has. We don't know if there's one of those. So does Stellar Conduct do cryo or electro damage? It can do either. For electro characters, it'll do electro damage. For cryo characters, it'll do cryo damage. How do you think the 600% EM from passive works? Yeah, I think it's just additive. Like, treat it the same way you'd treat a Llama Quill, is what I would assume.
Deuce on the loose!
Yeah.
Deuce on the loose!
Deuce on the loose!